Hi there. Welcome to The PrevenTable, the podcast giving you a seat at the table with conversations about the intersection of alcohol, drugs, and mental health in everyday lives. Take a seat and join us.
Welcome to The PrevenTable. With me today is founder and executive director of LOVEtheLOU, Lucas Rouggly. Welcome.
Good to be with you.
So, full disclosure, I don't know a lot about you. And, before we were just chatting, you didn't really know a lot about us. Right. We gave you like the quick down and dirty about what we do. And you might be wondering, why am I sitting here on this podcast?
It was actually, yes, that was going through my mind. Like, how in the world is this going to work?
Exactly. So one of our staff is friends with one of your interns and said, you have to feature LOVEtheLOU. What they do is incredible. You got to put a spotlight on them. And I've never heard of you. So tell us about you.
Okay, I'll give you the quick version.
We got all the time in the world. It doesn't have to be quick.
Let's go.
All right, let's go. Medium size.
So my wife and I, we moved into North St. Louis. It's going on 12 years ago.
Okay. And
just wanted to love neighbors.
Where did you move from?
Well, I'm originally from Jackson, Missouri.
Okay.
Southeast Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
Did some schooling up here in St. Louis, moved out to Oregon. We were married from the St. Louis part into the Oregon part, back to St. Louis. So this is our 20th wedding anniversary coming up.
Congratulations.
And 12 years in North City. So we've got 4 kids, and kind of the nonprofit started out of that. So kind of out of our home, loving neighbors. I mean, trying to not just let that word love be a word, but turn into actions. And so just any way we can demonstrate love, which this was, back in 2011. So it's before Ferguson. It's before, honestly, before a lot of people were talking about there being any kind of issues with division or segregation or, racism or any of that. And we kind of got a firsthand look at what it would be like to not just hear stories, but live with neighbors that have stories of, kind of an impoverished neighborhood.
So a lot of our listeners are from St. Louis, but not everyone is. So could you talk a little bit about, are you in Old North or?
So no, we're not in Old North. So our neighborhood is the Vandeventer neighborhood.
Okay. So can you talk a little bit about Vandeventer and like maybe some unique challenges, or maybe they're not all that unique? I don't know. What are some challenges of the Vanderloo neighborhood?
So, coming north of Del Mar, so for those that are not in St. Louis, but there's a pretty stark dividing line.
People call it the Del Mar Divide, right? So south of Del Mar, it's generally speaking higher SES status, schools get more resources, and then north of Del Mar,
in our neighborhood, so we live just north of Del Mar, which you would think, you're close enough to. But it's a really stark difference. So my neighborhood, my house, for example, cost $140,000. Really beautiful brick, late 1800s house, 3 stories. That same house across the street would be about $500,000. And so it's just a huge difference. North of Del Mar at the time was about 98% black. Mm-hmm. South of Del Mar at the time was about 75% white. And so you get into just a pretty big, stark division between socioeconomic, race, but just way of living. A lot of my neighbors, most of my neighbors are living below the poverty line. And the further north you go, the it's just continuing on with that evidence. So for the last 12 years, we've just kind of immersed ourselves in that. Where I sit today is I've learned so much that I think, going in, I had the goal of maybe making some changes or showing these loving actions that can make changes. But I honestly feel like I'm probably the one that's most changed out of this whole experience. So it's been awesome. It has been, it's been incredible. There's so many good people that are neighbors to me and have been neighbors for me over the years.
So when you talk about, putting love into action, like what does that look like? I guess one question I have is, are you a faith-based organization? What does it look like, shutting down the street and having neighborhood block parties? Is it like both of those? Is it somewhere between?
Definitely, my family is just driven by that faith component.
Okay.
So for me, I tried to early on, and we still try to do this, like really attach the work that Jesus did and to see what that would look like modern day in this context. So early on, a lot of block parties, a lot of like just feeding neighbors, a lot, like I would take my barbecue grill and just set it up on the front, on the front stoop there, and just meet people and just talk to people and really try to get to hear them and listen to them. And the more I've gotten to know Jesus, just over the years, I see what it's done is it's softened my heart to be less about trying to be heard and try to listen more. I don't think that's something that I really intended to do. I think that's just been Jesus kind of working on the inside of me. And so we've just listened a lot and tried to continue to listen and to learn from that.
So I appreciate you saying that, and I am sort of reflecting back to an episode that or a conversation that I had with my friend Dave, who runs an organization called R3 in East St. Louis. Yeah. Do you know Dave?
I know of him, and we've crossed paths a few different times.
And one of the things that, I asked him point blank is, how do you avoid or push against kind of the perception that you might be like trying to be a white savior.
Yeah.
Right. And, he paused for a minute and answered it more eloquently than I am right here. But basically it was just like, I'm just aware. I'm just aware of how I'm showing up, and all I can do is open my heart, and hopefully people receive that. So I'm going to kind of ask the same question to you. And since it sounds like it's a whole sort of a family operation, is that something that you and your family talk about? Is, how do we show up in community and be in community, not like we're trying to fix anything or save anybody?
Right. So I think first step for me is realizing how much I need to be saved, which is just true. Like, the more I'm immersed in the environment, and you feel the pressure and you experience the trauma and you go through it with neighbors, it really beats out the white saviorism, which, I don't think I ever would have said coming in like, I'm going to do this, but I definitely had a purpose of like, hey, this is a place that needs help. And what I've honestly seen is that I need help just as much, if not more. I am just as weak, if not more weak. And some of what I would have discounted in the past, some of my neighbors that I might have discounted in the past and that gets into addiction, and that gets into, because some of the stigmas of what I believe, I actually see them as mentors to me, and I'm not making that up, like leading me in a faith journey. And I never would have, if you would have told me 10 years ago that was going to happen, like I don't know that, like, so I think some of that pride, arrogance, whatever that is, just had to get beaten out by experience. And whether it's not even white or black as much as it is when you enter into some of these places, it's humbling to see how much we all are saying that prayer, give us our daily bread, like that kind of thought. I think that I think there's probably still some aspects and where I'm trying to like fix things.
Yeah. I know, I'm a fixer.
And letting go of that, man, is
I know.
hard.
It's really hard. I've gotten to the point now that in conversations with people, I try to start by saying, do you want me to like listen or do you want solutions?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
do you want me to commiserate with you or do you want me to try to solve it? Because I can just go straight into solving mode, and that isn't super helpful.
Yeah. This is my whole marriage you're describing
right
there. So
no kidding.
I have to preface everything.
Yeah. Am I fixing it? Am I listening? What do you need from me?
And I'm always wrong on that.
Yeah.
I just want the record to stand.
So you mentioned that you're from Jackson.
Yeah.
And I have a colleague that she and I were talking the other day about the differences, but really the similarities between rural poverty and challenges and urban poverty and challenges. And poverty, I think, is closely linked with, trauma and substance use and all of the things. And so, sometimes it seems to me that it's usually one or the other. Like we're focusing on urban, quote unquote problems, or we're focusing on rural, quote unquote problems. And many times the people in the urban core or in the rural areas, like they get othered, and then they end up othering each other because they're like, oh, well, all those city people get all the resources and all those rural people get all the resources. And while the challenges are different, they're also very, very similar.
They are. Yeah.
So do you see that in your sort of evolution?
So my last name is Rouggly, and if you go into Bollinger County and you hit some of the small towns near Marble Hill,
okay.
Mm-hmm, you're going to run into that name. And I'm so proud of the Rouggly name, but they are even more proud of the Rouggly name. And it means something, and there's a loyalty that they have to the point where a lot of them haven't been outside of Bollinger County. So then I come, and I'm living on Enright Avenue now, and I'm getting to know my neighbors, and they've kind of got this 7-block radius where they'll walk and hang out and have all the relationships. And I mean, I've met neighbors who haven't been to the Arch. We were kidded that.
Isn't that mind-blowing? Like, that you could live less than a mile away from somewhere and have never been. Like, and I recognize the privilege that I am saying, like, that I have just by saying that. And I had students who had never, been over to Illinois, and I'm like,
well, it's tribal. It's like, like you're comfortable with your people. You trust your people. And so that's a small circle in the city, like that's a certain block radius.
Especially when you've been, or you feel as if, or you have been subject to, like you have a reason to mistrust because you feel like you've been lied to, or you have been lied to, or, and so it makes sense that you would want to sort of hunker down in a community because I'm trying not to curse. This is why I'm trying.
Go for it.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Because you've been screwed over before, right? And so if you've been screwed over before, then you're not going to trust. And so...
Wait, screwed is the cursing, or is...
No, I know. I'm just trying. I feel like you're a man of faith, and so I really have to watch my words here, but...
It has to be real.
Okay, all right. But I mean, no wonder. If you feel like people have just constantly screwed you over, why would you expand?
Yeah.
You wouldn't, because those are the people that you trust, because you know that for better or worse, like you can count on them.
Right. And then when you're isolated and kind of living in that island, then you only know what you know. And then there's a lot of the world that you don't know. And then you're scared so then the fear creeps in. And then outsiders, and once again, no matter what skin color you are, but then the outsiders appear as threats.
Right.
And so it's you against the world.
We experience that a lot in the substance use field because there's been a lot of failed attempts at fixing or helping solve problems without actually involving the community. And it's usually driven by resources, right? So an organization, like ours in the past and like, several others have meant really well. They've gotten a grant, they've partnered with some sort of organization. Here's the resource we're going to provide. Oh, the money runs out, and then we leave. And so I think if the last couple of years have taught us nothing, it's that, yes, we need to make sure these resources are sustainable. Well, we actually also have to be involving community members who live in community to tell us when and how and where we should be allocating the resources. Like, they need to be at the table.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine that is something that you see quite a bit, as when people come into your neighborhood with solutions,
right,
whether it's for a new grocery store or whether for it's a new housing facility. And is that also where your organization gets involved? Or
yeah, so early on, there were a lot of people who were from the outside who knew us
mm-hmm.
and wanted to pitch in, however. So we have, like, one of the things that makes our nonprofit unique is we'll have well over 1,000 volunteers come in this year.
Wow.
And like significantly give.
Wow.
No, it's really, I mean, it's a thing. And most of those people are like white from the county.
Uh-huh.
We work with a lot of churches, a lot of schools.
Right. Okay. Okay.
And so you bring in groups, and then a lot of individuals, and that's always there's always a little bit of nervousness that you have, because in St. Louis we don't get along well, and we don't have diversity in relationships like we should. Like,
correct.
We need to grow in that.
Correct.
And so anytime you're bringing two people groups together, and my neighbors, are used to it being like I said, because 98% Black, and my family is the 2%. So,
yeah, right.
It's so we're used to not trusting white people that come in, and I'm speaking that as a neighbor, like why are you here?
Right, exactly.
And then you can flip that around, and you can go into other neighborhoods in St. Louis, and like they wouldn't trust other, cultures or skin colors.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of how we live. Like, we have our housing, most of it is not diverse. There's pockets, and I love some of the pockets of St. Louis that have a lot more diversity with it. But anytime we're bringing in people from the outside, and we do this regularly now, there's that tension piece of what are they going to have as an agenda? How do we teach? How can we use this as a teachable moment? And then what we've really tried to do recently, in the last couple of years, is we've really tried to allow neighbors to be the ones to lead. So it's even less about me. It's never a perfect formula, but like, how can I, we've got a bunch of 18-year-olds, we've got a bunch of 20-somethings, how can we give a platform for them to share their story, even if it's just for a minute, so that they're the one getting their voice amplified. And in doing so, you're almost flipping the script on what has been happening with that white saviorism piece, because everybody knows there's need in North St. Louis. So people coming in are expecting to give. What they're not expecting is to receive. Right. And if we can help foster that goes, I think, a long way for our city's reconciliation.
So, yes. So, and I wrote something down because I want to come back to that. So when volunteers, which is amazing, by the way, that you have this many volunteers and they're giving their time and their treasure, that's really incredible. What kinds of things are they doing? And do the neighbors come up with like projects, or are they like, this lot could be cleaned up, or this, we could serve food on this day? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. Yes. We've identified a few, what I would say kind of like the key components to needs, like almost like our own needs assessment over the years. But we've seen that housing is always a big.
Always, yeah.
There's 25,000, or at least I don't know what the most recent statistic is, but 25,000 vacant properties, vacant lots, and most of those, that's in the city limits, but most of those are on the north side. Right. So it is not hard to find issues, and to therefore it's not hard to meet needs. A lot of the neighborhoods, like when you experience day after day, year after year, trauma and isolation, lack of resources, no support, just like it causes almost this depression.
Yes.
To where it can be demoralizing if somebody comes into your neighborhood to clean it up.
Yes. I don't think people understand that.
Yeah. And so what we try to do is get ahead of that and ask the question, what do you want to do? What do you see? What is your vision? And I used to give this lip service, but I actually mean it now a lot more than I've ever realized it. I mean, my neighbors have some great ideas. And if I can listen to them and hear them, then they're going to lead out with the vision. And what ends up happening, this is really exciting, is the city is getting revitalized from within. Mm-hmm. So it's not a gentrification. Mm-hmm. It's the voice of the voiceless is cutting through and becoming almost given a spotlight, given that podium, and then whether I like the idea or not, these ideas start to then come out, and so we have tried, all kinds of things. We've taken vacant lots, turned them into gardens. Cool. We've grown every kind of vegetable and flower. Yeah. I don't know how to do any of that.
Right.
But there's a lot of neighbors who do, and there's a lot of outside volunteers who are great at making all those connections. At one point, we brought in chickens to the garden, and once again, I don't know anything about chickens. We had a couple neighbors who got really excited about chickens. I had a boy who was at the time, I think he was 14, and his backyard backed up to where the chicken coop was, and there. He showed up on my doorstep to tell me the story, but the story he told me was that a hawk had come in and had pinned down one of the chickens. And so he grabs a stick and he runs into the coop and he beats the hawk off and then is able to save the chicken. Wow. And he's telling me this, and it's all like a ton of adrenaline and stuff. He tells me this, I'm like, dude, that is how did you feel when you're done? Used to me we just had there was a summer where we had all this chicken drama, and it was just like a soap opera. We had I killed a possum. I felt really good about that. I apologize to all the
PETA. Yeah, right. Understand.
He had it coming because he was. There was a lot.
He had it coming.
But all of our neighborhood attention for my block and for a couple of surrounding blocks turned to these chickens. And when we did that, we forgot about, all of the other shit, if I may, that was going on. And it was so cool to see how I had, just thought maybe it was just about these physical things. And this is why I love the spiritual side of it too. And we talk about holistic, these are emotions that are getting attached within the relationships. We're doing these physical projects, but God ends up doing a reconciliation work within all of us as neighbors too. And so anyways, I've really enjoyed those kind of little things that just continually happen. So whether it's we could go on about those kind of projects.
Well, so you mentioned that people find out about you and your group through your nonprofit, through churches and through schools. do you get grant funding, or is it mostly like private individuals? And do you get any funding from the city of St. Louis?
There's some COVID relief funding.
Cool. Okay.
I would like to just give ourselves a plug for right now.
Awesome. This is your opportunity. Yes.
There you go. Most of our funding comes from individuals.
Cool.
Like it has been, and I will say like this.
So we are the exact opposite.
It's been really freeing to have like all of these people. Now it's difficult because we have a lot of people who give what they can.
Yeah.
And love us and support us in that way. But we don't have like, these massive, national.
Yeah, you don't have a Bezos or somebody.
Yeah, we don't.
But you have people who are making a large amount of people who are making a meaningful contribution to them.
Yeah, and I think that actually fits who we are as an organization because we're so grassroots. And a lot of times when you think of grassroots, you think of small and maybe even like that's cute.
Yeah, like good for you.
Yeah. But
started a nonprofit. How cute.
But then when that starts multiplying out.
Yep.
And all of a sudden you're now in 4 neighborhoods and you're representing thousands of people, but they each have like these individual connections and these individual relationships. That's actually pretty powerful. And I don't know. I think that's what we're called to do for the rest of our existence is not necessarily to chase down like federal grants and that kind of thing, but to really, as best we can, keep everything local, names over numbers, and a lot of that kind of work. I know that's not always attractive when it comes to like policies and like, but it is what St. Louis needs, I think. So,
well, I think that's exactly what St. Louis needs because every area does have its own unique personality, right? Jeff Vanderloo has different needs than Walnut Park, and Walnut Park has different needs than fill in the blank. And listening and doing a needs assessment, like you mentioned, formally or informally, and really listening to the residents and figuring out like what do they want and what do they need. I think that's what St. Louis needs. I also think you mentioned it earlier, and I wrote it down. You were talking about diversifying your personal life, and that is something that requires intentionality. But that is so powerful. And as a matter of fact, in 2018, and I've shared this story on this podcast before, but in 2018, we started meeting with some diversity consultants. And they pulled me aside, and after they interviewed me, and they're like, okay, look, your heart's in the right place, but we got to tell you, you have to diversify your personal life. The only people that that are different than you work with. And you're in a position of power. So it's a totally different relationship. And they said, and we're imagining like, oh, cute, you live in the city. Like that's, great. But how many of your neighbors do you actually talk to?
Right.
Look around at the grocery stores you go to. How many of those people look like you? And it was very hard for me to hear. And it really upset me. But they were exactly right. But I've had to be intentional about it, particularly in a city like St. Louis.
Yeah.
And that includes, going out of my way to shop at some different places or really trying to make substantive friendships, not just like associates or acquaintances or people that I know on LinkedIn. Like that doesn't count. Yeah. And it has made my life so much richer. So I would imagine coming from Jackson and then moving out to Oregon, which is... there are pockets of diversity, but it's also pretty, right. Okay. So it was an intentional choice that you and your wife made, correct?
Yeah.
How did that come about, if you don't mind my asking?
No, and I don't mind you asking at all. Like there was a couple years worth of kind of agonizing over that decision. And we prayed a lot. I knew that we were going from Portland back to St. Louis, and I knew that that north side was going to be the area of the most need. And I'll say this from more of like my faith perspective. But what was really interesting about while I was in Portland is that a lot of the people in Portland were not what I would consider a Christian or believed in like God or anything. You know, it was just it was very spiritual, but it wasn't like this. It was out of the Bible.
Church every right.
This exactly. It's a different culture. It's a different world. And those people out there had, in a lot of ways, better morals than I see here in St. Louis. And I really struggled with that because I thought the best morals should be Christians, you know, or, you know, like that was kind of my upbringing, especially being Jackson.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
And so that was challenging to meet people that were just really genuinely good people. And then to begin to recognize some of St. Louis's flaws as a city, where we were deeply, deeply divided. And once again, at the time, nobody was really talking about it. But we're still deeply, deeply divided to the point where, like, we've got to make some change. It's probably not going to be a top-down change. It's going to have to be these individual changes.
More.
And so that was what drove our decision. We really felt, and my wife is awesome. I'm not just saying that because I'm hoping that she'll listen just to this part.
And because you're like about to celebrate a pretty big
20. Yeah. I want to make it to 20. But the amount of faith that she has had, because we got 4 kids, and like my kids have been through tons of drive-by shooting, like countless. You know, that's tough. That is hard to deal with. And what is interesting from our perspective, and we have to come back to this a lot, but we actually have a plan B. Like if we chose to, like, so we, you know, like if we decided that we wanted to move back to Jackson, or, you know, head out to the suburbs or something like that, we could. And I've got a lot of neighbors who don't have that option.
Right.
And they feel stuck and maybe are stuck. And so even that speaks to my privilege and speaks to, like, oh my goodness, like, and so we've had to, like, this has been a huge faith journey for us. Like, and every time, the way that faith has worked for me is, like, every time that I think I've given everything I possibly could give, there's just a little bit more that I have to get. It's like, so I don't know that there's been a season where we haven't been stretched beyond what we thought we could handle. And then you turn around and you're like, but my neighbors have been doing this from day one.
Right.
There's some amazing faith that I need to learn from them, and had been learning. So
what, you've touched on this a little bit. So what does success with LOVEtheLOU look like for you and your wife? What does that look like?
Okay. I think about this one a lot.
I'm not surprised.
I'm going to give you 5 years ago, I wrote it down.
Okay.
And I wanted, I wrote down one city, meaning North City and other parts, I'll say North City, North County, are treated the same that other parts and have the same amount of resources. So, like we live in it's a food desert where we're at. It's a resource desert. Like there's no, like the banks aren't clamoring to get on Page right now, you know, or MLK, and it, that breaks my heart that kids can grow up. And like I had a kid that celebrated his birthday. This was years back, but he had never been to Walmart, and he's like, "Hey, can we go to Walmart?" You know, and like, but Walmart doesn't want to be where we are, and so that kind of thing, I think, it gets into, and I don't want to be preachy, but it gets into the heart of God. Like I think He cares about those kind of inequities, like there, and so to elevate neighbors' lives is a huge piece into experience life. That's what I would have said 5 years ago. I am learning, and this is where I'm at this year. I think my neighbors, if people would listen, I think they could lead. And I don't mean this like as I want them to rise above everybody else and then crush everybody. Like, it's not that. Like, I think that there are future presidents, mayors, that I'm working with every day, leaders, and they're not drawing attention to themselves. And I've got a few examples off the top of my head where they don't want it, that's not their, but like when you get to know them, these are some of the strongest individuals that you will ever meet, and they should be writing books and doing movies, and like everything about their life is inspiring. And I've got so many stories where I've seen like these matriarchs like pick up an entire block and just own it, and like they're not scared of gangs, they're not scared of gunshot, none of that, and they just run with it, and it changes overnight. Like, we've seen it happen multiple times now where like a whole section of North City like kind of just like, oh, okay, we're following, and I can give you Miss Sharon, I can give you Miss Tawana, I can give you Keisha. We can go down the list of just some really strong individuals that I don't want them just getting jobs like and getting paychecks. I want to learn from them, and I want them to have as much voice as they feel called to have. And so that's a little different than just like a level playing field, although I think that's a piece of it. I think it's now talking about like, who has God made them to be, and can they be it?
And helping, providing the resources and access to the resources so that they can realize who God has, what God wants them to be. Helping them actualize.
And then when you begin to think of it like that, poverty is less about money, and it's more about not realizing why you're even here. You know, and so then you start getting into like,
oh, that's pretty powerful, I gotta say.
That was just off the top of my head.
That was really, you should like write that down.
Here, write it down.
That was really good.
I can't even repeat it.
Yes, but it was, we'll do it in playback. But it's actually very powerful.
There's so much truth to that, because like, and what I'm seeing is a bunch of neighbors who would be labeled poor, who aren't poor at all.
Yeah.
And that's what I want St. Louis to realize, is like, if you heard, or if you watched, or if you walked alongside for even a week, you personally would grow so much. And so it has very little to do, once again, with that wallet size, and everything to do with where your mind is, and who you are becoming, and how you're getting there.
I feel like we could keep talking for a very long time. And, you know, I appreciate all you're doing in Jeff Vanderloo, but I appreciate how you're doing it. Because as a person who is not a believer, I did not find anything you said like off-putting or too off the rails or anything like that. And I do believe that what you're doing is you're speaking to the human spirit. Which, I mean, if I believe in anything, I believe in humans. And you are one human. You have a whole group of humans who are quite literally just like working together to raise everybody up, neighbor by neighbor. And that's really incredible. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Thank you for what you're doing in the city. If people want to volunteer, donate, find out more, where would they go? And we'll put the links in the chat, but where would they go?
LOVEtheLOU.com. And that'll get to our team.
LOVEtheLOU.com. Okay.
And there's social media out there and stuff, and that's all beyond me.
I know. We'll tag all of that. We'll blah, blah, blah. You know, we'll do all of that. Lucas, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate it. If you like what you heard, if you want to learn more about Love the Lou, please consider reading, reviewing, and subscribing to The PrevenTable. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us at The PrevenTable, brought to you ad-free by Prevent+Ed. Prevent+Ed works to reduce or prevent the harms of alcohol and other drug use through education, intervention, and advocacy. Please visit their website at PreventEd.org. Like what you heard? Rate, review, and subscribe to stay up to date with what we are serving on The PrevenTable.